See, we have a question right up here. Can we get a microphone up here, or maybe do you mind going over to the microphone? There's, sorry, one on each side.
My question's here.
Oh,
So I
thank
want
you.
to move. Hi, everybody. My name is Thu P3. So I'm a peer worker. I'm part of the community, and when it comes to outreach, most things that one sees and face, you feel like you want to give more to educate more, especially if you're a peer educator. And I've been listening to both the doctors, and when it comes to, I'll start with the first doctor. When it comes to the first doctor, I wanted to know, because this, what I do when I go for outreach, I always go to the people that are using needles. And they always have sores, like I clean wounds. Like mostly they'll explain to me like, I don't want to go to a clinic because I'm gonna be judged. And when it comes to be judged, and you could like look at the wound. It is sometimes it's got worms. It's smelly and it's deeply painful. And I want this person to be fine. And I could tell because my background, I was homeless myself. I was using myself, so I could understand that the person will never go. But the service that I could give is because I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a person that went for training to clean wounds. So when I'm helping this person, I, I I know I'll just clean the wound. The person will go. They'll come back next week. What do one do? What service should one do? Because I know that they will never go to a clinic because they'll be exact. So that's the question that I want to know. What can I do about that? To since next to you, the next doctor. Um, and this is my first time doing this, so I'm so nervous. But actually, I'm going to do it. Yes, I think I've been working a lot, like all my life, because mostly, I think after I became homeless, and then I started getting opportunities, and now I'm serving people that I know if it happened to me, it could happen to them. So I always understand that a language is a barrier problem when it comes to people who would give a service when it comes to hepatitis. Because I remember myself that I didn't know there were like different hepatitis, and also how people bring services to people. It will be like we're chasing a number. There wouldn't be that specific thing of this is an intimate kind of a conversation whereby you feel, you understand, you're giving information. So it's always like you get like 3 people that are here to come and test, but they are chasing a number to take it back. So finders could know this is what we've done. So explanation, like they never give this clear kind of an understanding or having somebody to translate. So I want to know, how do people get a translator? Because if I'm Xhosa or I'm Sotho, then comes a person who's talking about hepatitis and in English. It's just like totally, I got confused myself. I remember myself when I was in those situations. So I just want to know what one do. Thank you. That was hard.
Thank you for the question. Well, firstly, I want to say thank you for the work that you're doing as an outreach worker, and it's so valuable. And I think we can really learn from these perspectives, because the kinds of perspectives that you're recounting, where people are facing stigma, they fear seeking healthcare because there are so many barriers to access anyway, and then there's the stigma that they face. And I think incorporating these kinds of perspectives from peer workers these are the perspectives we need to transform the healthcare system. So in terms of what you're doing, I think what you're doing is fabulous, and hopefully for the people that you're encountering, it's building and fostering some trust. I think it's going to take generational shifts for that kind of trust to move across into the healthcare system. And that's where I think we see the value of outreach workers and peer support workers. And perhaps it's about how can we train you so that, or how can peer support workers be trained to deliver further modes of care so that people who feel like accessing the healthcare system is just too stigmatizing, you're lowering that barrier to access. And I think that would be one way, but I really do think we need transformation in the healthcare system, because one of the things we've realized talking to people who use drugs is the stigma becomes internalized. And so we've seen that when they do access care, it's often very late in the piece, and Eliswa can probably testify to this. So a condition that was relatively minor has become serious, has become quite difficult to treat. And when they access care, even the most basic care, if they receive care that's non-judgmental, they perceive that as excellent care. So the expectations, it's like we have the stigma is so deep-seated that people now expect that if they access care and it's simply not judgmental, then that's already excellent care. So we really need to raise the bar, because people who use drugs expect that they will be judged, that they will be discriminated against, that they will be looked down upon, and that kind of internalized stigma obviously impacts people's willingness to access care, and it means that if they do, or when they do, whatever problem they might be experiencing has become even more difficult to treat.
Also, when it comes to, sorry, it took me so long to ask this question because it comes back to how one has all these years felt like, am I going to be judged about, because it always carries, it's within, yeah.
Thank you. You would know, South Africa, we very diverse, and language, we are rich in that. I personally speak 3 languages, so I find it very easy to explain depending on who I'm addressing. And so having spent almost almost 10 years in the clinic and treating a whole lot of people with viral hepatitis, I've found creative ways of, one, making the viruses less scary, and two, sorry. Okay, sorry, I hope everyone heard that. Yes. So, I think we do have access to translators if you need translation, but I can sort of maybe say with 95% surety that majority of patients that attend our liver clinic at Groote Schuur Hospital understand exactly what viral hepatitis is, and we try and destigmatize it. In relation to the question that you asked earlier, we work very closely with the networks, and usually we get referrals and we screen them very well, and we do anticipate that certain people will come into clinic, see that there's 80 people waiting to see 5 doctors, and therefore we tend to prioritize the ones that we know that they might be a bit agitated, looking at the numbers and thinking that I'm gonna be here and spend the whole day. And that's the community of people who use drugs. It's very easy to manage. Bring them into the room, we find out how they're doing, we do a pill count, we give them a box, and we say, we'll see you in a month or so, pop in and knock in my room the next time. And therefore that kind of feels like personalized care, and they don't need to see a second person where they need to explain themselves, and it's tricky, but we try and make it work, because we fear that we might lose them if we let them wait amongst the 80 people that are waiting to see the 5 liver doctors for different reasons. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
We have 2 questions over here. Yep.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you for your excellent presentations and your amazing work. I am Andrea. I am from Ecuador. I am from Latin America, which is a big production trafficking region that has been devastated, by drug trafficking, and not only our lands, but also the consequences have been there for women. And I honestly have an awkward feeling, and I feel uncomfortable with the term narcofeminism. I come here with a lot of curiosity and try to open like a discussion about it, because when you describe all of the inequalities and intersections of stigma, that is the reflection of an equal gender role system and the patriarchy, and feminism itself, it's already been discussing those intersections. Feminisms without an extra tag. We've been discussing housing and health equity and redistribution of care and time and so on. And when I know that a people-centered approach in harm reduction must, put the people who use drugs in the center. But even in public systems that has embedded harm reduction in health and in the health systems, the biggest obstacle still it is the war on drugs, the prohibition, and sometimes I wonder if this kinds of names gives legitimacy to those actors and to those dynamics. And so yeah, I wonder if it's strategic to even create a new identity, a new contentious identity to talk about these issues. When I understand it is a contextualized thing, it comes from Eastern Europe and Central Asia, but I wonder if if it's really necessary, especially when it touches so many sensitivities, especially when we know the devastating consequences of narco trafficking, which is the big elephant on the room when we talk about harm reduction, right? So yes, I want to open that dialogue with you in your amazing work, and thank you for your presentations again.
Thank you for the question. If I understood correctly, you're saying that sort of even the term narco-feminism and the association of narcotics is contentious. That was an issue that the narco-feminist activists who founded the movement confronted head-on, because they found many of the Latin American feminists were saying this doesn't square well with our views. Narco has a very negative connotation. And so I guess one thing I would say is that these forms of feminist organizing and activism would take into context the local specificities. And it's not to suggest that it's not contentious. Of course it is, but it's at the sites of contention that we need these kinds of movements. And I think the value of having some kind of umbrella term, whether you call it narco-feminism or another form of advocacy and activism, is it shines a light on the intersectionality of oppression. It shines a light on the women and gender diverse people who use drugs who are otherwise excluded from other networks. And that was kind of a repeated refrain from the founding narco-feminist activists. They weren't suggesting that this was a unified, homogenous network by any means, but rather that they were responding to their sense of being excluded from queer organizations, being excluded from organizations of sex worker advocates because of their drug use. And so this was an inclusive space that they were trying to foster, where they recognized the ways in which people who use drugs, and particularly women who use drugs, are multiply discriminated against. And so feminism, although feminisms can be a really inclusive space, their experience suggested that actually there were modes of exclusion at work that meant their voices weren't being heard. And they felt really strongly that they needed some kind of umbrella movement and term to capture the advocacy and to highlight the particular needs and the kind of multiple whammy of stigma that women and gender diverse people who use drugs confront. But certainly, I know in the Latin American context, the choice of the term narco-feminism has raised contention. And there may be other terms which speak to the local specificities of different contexts that are better suited to the kinds of needs of those communities. I hope that addresses your question.
We are at time, but I want to let the one last question go ahead. So please.
Ellen McCrary. I'm from St. Louis in the U.S. It's more of a comment, so I apologize. But I'm really excited to hear that you treated someone for Hep C in pregnancy through shared decision making, and I'm presenting on that later. But the comment is that, women are already getting treated for Hep C at lower rates than men, And I guarantee it's because women get pregnant and then they aren't treated postpartum. And, I think we really need to ask ourselves why we're choosing Hep C to be the one thing that we're requiring a clinical trial for in pregnancy to treat in pregnancy. It's amazing that's happening, don't get me wrong. Like, we need both. But the majority of my patients don't qualify for a clinical trial because of pre-existing conditions, preterm birth. This is an exclusion criteria for impact, for example. And they just don't have access. But everything else we do in pregnancy from a medical standpoint is through shared decision-making and registries. We have a problem now, and the clinical trials are going to take time. And so I do think that this fear, if we're not going to put the effort into treating people postpartum, which is a lot of effort, we need to really consider what's holding us back from treating in the second and third trimester. And having that shared decision making. Because I'll tell you, the women that I'm talking to, over 75% of them are saying, even though it's theoretical, I want to prevent that potential transmission to my baby. And that psychological burden, especially when associated with a history of substance use, I just can't even imagine that. Even though, like, frankly, perinatal transmission of Hep C, I don't think it's the end of the world. Like, we can treat it. We just have to be able to screen for it. So, I think that is something that is really overlooked. And I just, thank you. We should talk more. But I think that should be a call to action.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much again to our speakers for excellent presentations. We'll move on to the next part of this session. Thank you again.